Hello, hello, good evening. Today is July 11th. We are in the Pensacola Public Library in Pensacola, Florida. My name is Donovan Carter with the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program. I'm here with
Asha Clarke, Lorena Manasturean, and Vanessa Obando.
And today we're interviewing the lovely and amazing
Catherine McCray.
So great to meet you, Catherine, or Kat, as she goes by.
Yes.
So, Kat, can you first tell us about, who you are and where you're from?
Okay, well, I was born in Minot Air Force Base, North Dakota. My name is Catherine McCray. Born Catherine Angela Lemos. My parents are both from Southern California, and they got here in 1989, stationed at Hurlburt Field, and my dad actually retired out of there in 97, and we never left. My dad and mom, they're from big city out in, California. We don't speak Spanish. So we didn't go back, and, growing up here and going into a big area like that, they just weren't comfortable with that. So we stayed in Paradise instead.
So you've lived in Pensacola pretty much your whole life, you're saying?
I grew up in Mary Esther, and over the last few years, I've been in Pensacola. I was dating someone out here in the art business because I do art for fun. I just happen to get paid sometimes.
That's a pretty sweet gig. That's pretty cool. Doing what you want.
Yes, we were over on V Street for a few years.
Oh, you got a gallery out there?
No, it was a art studio. We did classes and paint parties and crazy weird paint parties. It was a good time.
Very cool. And you said you lived where for most of your life?
Mary Esther. Mary Esther, which is about, I think it's like 30 miles away on 98.
West, east?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. Still in Florida?
We used to go east, and we would come to Pensacola when I was little, like every weekend. My parents, in California, they did swap meets, but they had the flea market here, so they went all the time. And we'd always go the same way. I remember we would take the bridge, obviously, and then we would go, I called it the Cussy Bridge. Now it's called, I guess, the Graffiti Bridge. But when I was a little girl, I'd be like, oh, Mom, look at that. Look at that bad word. So growing up, even now, sometimes I actually giving directions to my mom, it's like, through the Cussy Bridge, Mom, through the Cussy Bridge. But now it's become, oh my gosh, a cool landmark. I mean, I've even gotten to paint on it before, so. And then what else did we do when we would come here? Obviously the mall, but we had this deal. If the sign was hot, the Krispy Kreme donut sign was hot, because that's the way we would go to the flea market, we would get donuts every single time. So we'd go, we'd be driving, we'd be like, they're hot! So we would always do that. But now I think we have one in Destin now, but it's not as fun as coming to Pensacola.
Very cool. And can you talk about, so you said you were born in North Dakota?
Minot Air Force Base, North Dakota.
Okay.
There's nothing out there but an Air Force Base and maybe some humans, but mainly an Air Force Base.
And did both of your parents serve, or?
No, just my dad. My dad, corrosion control, he did that for 20 years. So basically he painted the planes. And then when he came out of the military, he worked for a company called Custom Colors. He ran a painting company. They did commercial and residential painting from Sandestin to Pensacola.
Oh. Very cool.
A couple of clarifying questions. First, could you spell your name for the record?
Yes, it's Catherine, and McCray is actually McCray. I think it was supposed to be, from my ex-husband, it was actually supposed to be McRae, but I don't know if his mother knew the spelling of her son's father's name, so we actually have it spelled differently than the rest of his family. And I recently found out they're from Milton. He's got a big family out there, but we just have different spelling of the name.
Super interesting. And Mary Esther, you said it was called?
Yeah, Mary Esther.
And is that with 2 R's? How would you spell Mary
One
Esther?
R. It's Mary, and then Esther, Esther.
So you mentioned that you didn't move back to Southern California because your family didn't know Spanish very well.
No.
So ethnically, where are you from?
Okay, so ethnically, well, DNA is funny. Okay, so ethnically, I am Mexican and Navajo. But DNA, I guess you could say it's Spanish, Portuguese, and Navajo. But my grandmother, on my mother's side, she was born on the reservation in Socorro, New Mexico. Well, I don't think it's the actual city. It's Socorro County, New Mexico, where they have a small patch for the Navajo Nation. It's like the only one that's not in the actual Navajo Nation. I think the reservation is called Alamo Reservation. When she was born, even after she left the reservation at 13, they didn't even have electricity. And she was born in 1945. I don't think they got that until a long time after that. But you didn't have a really good life on the reservation, so she got married at 13 and got out of there. And had my mom when she was 13, and they lived in California. In California, we didn't... I hate that we don't speak Spanish. Not even my parents speak Spanish, which is a sad thing, but I understand, after, talking and, learning the history. Mom, Dad said you weren't treated right if you were at school. You weren't, it was be this way or be that way. So they did not teach their kids, not my dad's side or my mother's side. It just wasn't done back then. My grandfather, my dad's side, he ran a big, huge orange grove, or actually it was grapefruits. And my dad's family grew up on that farm, and he ran the whole thing. And you can imagine, just, I guess they would always have I don't know, what are they called, Border Patrol come through. And my dad has this story about when he was 8 years old. He was, working on the farm because that's what he does. They live there. But they came through and they put my dad on a bus, and they were about to take him wherever they were taking, the people. And my grandfather had to chase the bus down and get my dad off of the bus trying to take him out. But I guess they had a lot of migrant workers and stuff like that. And my dad was born in 57, so if he was probably in the 60s when that happened. But yeah, no Spanish. I'm still trying though. I'm still trying.
And were there any practices or maybe just cultural aspects of being Mexican and Navajo that your family practiced growing up?
I totally control the weather. Actually, they grew up Catholic, both sides. It's actually really funny. I remember being at my grandmother's house when I was a little girl and looking at the first communion pictures, hundreds of kids on this one thing. I said, hey, there's Mom. And my dad's like, huh? What do you mean? And sure enough, you guys, my parents were in the same 3rd grade communion class. On this picture, they didn't even know it. I mean, they've been together 44 years, well, married 44 years, obviously longer married than that, but I just thought it was really funny. But yeah, they grew up Catholic. I did not get any of the rituals or anything from Navajo. Now, my grandmother, I wouldn't make her mad. I wouldn't make her mad. Things start falling off the walls. It's just a little crazy little lady right there. But no, we don't practice any of that. I wish we did. I did remember getting a book, and I like to read the stories, which is really crazy about the stories, you guys. So I've got this Native American book with stories, and the stories that are in there is really crazy. You can tell the ones that are lost. On the East Coast, a lot of Native Americans, the whole tribe was wiped out. Whereas you go further west, they're not so much. So the stories in this book are really intact in the Navajo ones and the ones out that side, but the ones on this east side, very broken stories. Very interesting to read that like that.
And growing up, well, first, where would you say, if you had to pinpoint a location, I know you're all over the U.S., that you feel like you're from?
Where do I feel like I'm from? I would have to say Florida. I would definitely say Florida.
Okay. And growing up in Mary Esther, that would be where in Florida you spent a lot of your childhood. What was it like being brown in Mary Esther? Were there a lot of other folks who looked like you? Could you speak about
absolutely not. Me and my family were like the only Mexicans, it felt like. It was really not, it was definitely not an easy thing to go through, but I was never alone. I went to a school in, the school used to be an all-black school at some point. It was called Combs New Heights Elementary School, and it was the one closest to the base. And so we had a good mixture of all kinds of people, all kinds, but not very many Hispanic people at all, especially compared to now. Oh my gosh, lots of us there. But actually, it was the black women in the school that made sure I didn't fail or made sure I wasn't left behind. You had the white teachers, and it's the South. You knew as a kid if you were treated differently. So I kind of just went with that, and I was protected in that aspect. And then at some point, I think maybe in the 4th or 5th grade, my mom started working at the school. So I got a little bit more protection at that point. But definitely not easy. I remember hearing things from friends and stuff, and you knew it came from their family, like I couldn't join the Girl Scouts. I had to do the brownies, and I'm like, huh? Or, hear certain words like wetback and things like that I didn't understand as a kid. I remember telling my sisters had a joke one day. She had a wet shirt from her hair being wet after the shower, and she's like, look, Dad, I'm a wetback. And she didn't know either. Oh, my dad got so upset, you guys. He was so mad. But she didn't know. We didn't know. We thought it was funny. But, you didn't, as a kid. So, but yes, that was not easy, and I do let my kids know. My kids are mixed. I remember even my mother, she was concerned about me having kids. She was just like, they're going to treat you different. They're going to treat the kids different. Are you sure you want to get married? I'm like, yeah, Mom, of course. Even language-wise, what would she would always, talk about. My friends would come over. She would just be talking to my dad or something. She'd be like, the negrita, she's coming over today. I'm like, Mom, what did you just say? And she wouldn't mean it in a way. She was saying it, I guess in Spanish, but it always offended me. And at some point, she didn't say it anymore because I got so upset with her, as I got older. So that was entered out. But, actually it was really crazy. There is a really weird, horrible story. So it was in the 90s. There is a Denny's in Fort Walton Beach. And everybody's like, let's go to Denny's. I'm like, no, I don't go to Denny's. And here's the reason why. My mother, her 2 friends, one African-American friend, one white friend, and my mom, Navajo. They go to the Denny's and they were not served. My mom's friend was served, and they were not served. You guys, this was the 90s in Fort Walton Beach. That is something that's always stuck with me. Even now, I'm like, I will not go to Denny's. I'm not doing it. But yeah, that's a real story, and it's just crazy to me because if you ignore it, you don't realize how close and how long ago we were. That long ago at all, really.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned kind of living with your sister. Was it just you two? Or did
No, I actually have a pretty big family. I have 2 older sisters and a younger brother. My name's Catherine, but my sisters got really cool names. Diana and Lolita. And my brother, his name is Martin. Yeah. Funny because, we didn't say our name even the way you're supposed to say our name. I remember telling Dad, hey, Dad, I met somebody at the club. His name was like yours, but he said his name was Martin. He looks at me. My dad's like, my name's not Martin. It's Martin. I'm like, oh, my bad, Dad. I didn't mean anything by it, Dad, sorry. But even my last name, it wasn't until I was an adult that I realized it wasn't even pronounced. They didn't even pronounce it the right way. I was always Catherine Lemos growing up, Catherine Lemos, and now I put a little twist. It's supposed to be Lemos, but you Americanize it, I guess.
And what do you do for a living? You mentioned...
I am a dental assistant for a root canal doctor. I absolutely love doing it. I've worked for my doctor for almost 11 years now. I went to Northwest Florida State College in Niceville. And it was like a year-long program, and I ended up falling in love with what I do is endodontics, which is root canal therapy. The best thing for me to do is be able to help people, and through their fears, they end up having a root canal. They're like, let's do another one. I'm like, yeah. So I really enjoy it.
Is there a specific reason that you went into this field of work?
Yes, actually my aunt Rita in New Mexico, she was a dental assistant, and she was always beautiful, vivacious. Oh, she looks like Selena, you guys. So I was like, I want to be just like Auntie Rita. So when it was time to pick a job, or a career anyways, I was like, well, I want to be like Auntie Rita. So I did it, and it was only like a year-long program. They train you everything. I was able to get a Pell Grant, so I didn't even have to pay for it. So a year of school, and I was able to like never have to ask anybody for help again. It's really good. And I've been able to move on up the right way, you know. So it's been really good.
And you mentioned that you're an artist?
I do painting. I actually grew up drawing my own little cartoons and stuff like that just for fun. And then I started painting. And then I was out in Fort Walton Beach about 4 years ago. Maybe it's been longer now, actually. Yeah, it's been closer to 5 years. I was out there at my niece's like dance school opening, and there was a guy drawing pictures of people, like not characters, but live photos, or like real life. So he drew me, and I was just like, oh, this is cool. We then just started dating and got an art studio out here in Pensacola. So we were doing paint parties and all kinds of cool stuff, like body painting. You guys, that was fun. What was the other ones we used to do? Puff and paints, a lot of those. Birthday parties and things like that. Well, while I was doing that, I was also painting on my own. I started painting to a lady actually on YouTube. Her name was Joni Young from Canada, and she does a lot of bright colored things and landscapes. So I started painting with her, and ever since then I've learned everything from that lady. I've learned brushes, I've learned strokes and all this kind of stuff, and now I do the most amazing pieces of the earth and sky in neon colors.
Wow. That's awesome. We'll be looking forward to the Cat McCray exhibit coming to...
I actually am going to be with the Open Books, Prison Books, next June. My friend Grace with the Latin bilingual newspaper, she had mentioned to me that they were looking for somebody, and I was a little bit late, but he was like, well, I like your work. Can we get you next June? So next June, May and June, I'll be over there for my very first one.
Where at?
Open Books, Prison Books.
Awesome.
Yes.
Very cool. And would you say you have you talked about how you've learned under, I'm forgetting her name.
Joni Young.
Say again?
Joni Young.
Joni Young, yes. Do you have other, perhaps, inspirations of art?
I am inspired by a lot of American artists. I grew up, do you guys know Thomas Kinkade?
I know the name, but...
Thomas Kinkade, he had a studio or a art gallery in Pensacola Mall when I was a little girl growing up. And he had one out in Destin as well. But he actually had a home in Navarre. And you will find his paintings on any cruise ship you ever go. But what's really special about his is he plays with the lights. So he will do a painting of a cottage, let's just say in the woods. And he'll have lighting underneath it. And you can change this lighting over the picture, and it changes from morning to afternoon to nighttime just by turning the knob of this thing, which is really funny because I actually thought about this for the first time just last week. My paintings actually all glow. I don't do that on purpose. I like neon colors, and one day I turned the light off and I was just like, whoa, look at my painting, is glowing under a black light. And so I just think it's really funny because I grew up, looking at his art, and I remember my mom being at the Pensacola, because we'd come here all the time, we'd be at that mall, and Mom and Dad would like gawk over this painting. It was huge over there with the lighting. It was the teepee Indians, the Indian teepees that he didn't have a big collection of. And they, for years, looked at it. They never bought it, you guys. Then that man died. And I said, you guys should have bought that painting. But like I said, you can buy them on the cruise ships, calendars everywhere. But I really liked his work a lot. And it's just funny because now I do I thought about it, like I said, just last week, and I was just like, I do landscapes too. And I do skies. And they glow. I was like, look at this.
Very cool. And do you mostly do skies and landscapes?
Yes, but I also do characters. So that's what makes money. I do a lot of gallery night, but actually so I've been working with this artist, right? But one day we were at the fair. He was, doing the portraits at the fair, and I get anxiety around a lot of big crowds. So I was like, let me just paint while you're here. So I was painting these little chibis, which is like the baby version of something. So you got Mickey Mouse as a regular Mickey Mouse, but then you can make it a baby version. So my son was just like, let's do Naruto. And I did, and you guys, I accidentally sold 30 paintings at the fair, $25 a pop. I wouldn't even be done with the painting, and people would be like, I want to buy that. I'd be like, oh, really? So when they would buy it, I'd be running down the hall in the inside of the fair, just like screaming in excitement that I just sold a painting, and now I've been doing gallery night. It's been a lot of fun. I actually got into gallery night this coming month, so I'm really excited. So that's why I do the characters there as well. That's what sells. So I like my landscapes, and they sell too, but it's really the characters that really go. So like Baby Yodas and stuff like that.
Very fun. That's amazing. Actually, let's almost go. Question.
Kind of going back, but earlier you mentioned growing up reading about Native American stories. Is there maybe one that you would say has influenced you most in your life?
A little bit. Okay, so a lot of those stories of the sun or God are actually women, female. So that was always something very powerful to me, and kind of gives me a little inspiration in life. And, when they tried to make us housewives, they tried. I know my power, and I think if anything, I try to let my daughter know that too. And I don't know if you guys notice, like I notice, women are coming up, and we're gonna be running some stuff around here. We're not our grandparents' daughters, that's for sure. For sure.
Also, going back to previously in the interview, you mentioned how your mother at first tried to kind of discourage you from marrying or having children because of how your children may be received by the public, by society. Could you talk a bit more about why your mother might have felt like that, or maybe her experience having you and your siblings as children?
Yes, my mother's side is actually very racist when it comes to African American people, which is crazy because, like I said, growing up, this is who took me in. This is, so I didn't know anything different until I think it was in the 9th grade. I went to California. We went maybe 3 times since my childhood, and it was a big deal because we'd go for 2 weeks. And I remember I had my first boyfriend, and I told my aunt, and she said, oh, you have jungle fever. And I was just like, huh? I didn't know what that meant, and I probably didn't even know what it meant until another year later. But as time went on, I really learned that my mother's side, especially, nobody like that on my dad's side, but they also very different upbringings. But even when my son was born, he was born in 2005, my mother took him a year later to go meet the family in California, and my grandfather would not even look at the baby. He would not even look at this child, brought him to the house. My mother, that's how she was raised. She didn't stand up like I wish she would have, just but that's her father. I understand that, but he would not look at my child. And as I grew up, I realized that was how they were raised on that side. It was just a horrible upbringing. But yeah, very different sides.
So your ex-husband is Black?
Yes.
Okay. And because you mentioned that your mom's side of the family, your dad's side raised very differently, and that led to their kind of like racial tolerance being different.
Yes.
Could you talk a bit more about that, the differences in their upbringing?
Oh, gosh. So my mother, I would have to say, was on the poorer side, money-wise. Now, my grandfather was a welder. Her dad was a welder at Kaiser Steel in California, which was at that time, the largest steel manufacturer in the world. He made a good living doing that, but him and my grandmother had a horrible relationship. You know, like I said, my grandmother came off the reservation at 13 because, to flee her father, who was inappropriate with her. So she had that kind of upbringing, whereas my father, it's hard to explain. The best way I can explain it, we're not really, like, it's so funny because we say we're Mexican, but there was not always a border. So you could actually trace my lineage back forever, 1600s, for my dad's side, where there was no border. It was actually California at that time. They grew up a little different. I would have to say, in regards to actual blood, kind of more the colonizer, Spanish and Portuguese, my dad's side. So, everybody goes to college. Everybody has a house. Everybody has good, and that's just how it was. They were also forward thinking, I think even my father, I have mixed cousins, and that was a long time ago. So yeah, my parents are very different sides.
We have to be wrapping up in 3 minutes.
Okay. Sorry, thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
I appreciate it a lot.
No problem.
I want to ask about, you mentioned kind of both sides of your family and kind of merging with you and then kind of being passed on to your kids, right? And you mentioned before about how you don't really have that same connection to to pieces of your heritage. How do you wish to perhaps rebuild that and also pass it on to your own children?
Actually, we do. I talk a lot. So growing up, it was just like, do this, do that, got it. Now we talk. But you have a lot more tools at your hands now. You can go on the internet and find anything. The real truth, because we didn't get the truth growing up. My mother, every year at elementary school, she would bring our jewelry, our Native American things. So we have these Kachina dolls, pretty dolls, basically, of the hoop dancer and all these things, and all the Native American jewelry. Now, this is a fake, but the things that my mother has that are in the safe that you can't get to, they're huge pieces, squash blossoms. She would bring those to the school. We would talk. So I share that stuff with the kids. But we do a lot of trips. We take a lot of trips to Mexico. I love to travel, so that's how I'm going to pass that on to my kids, is by sharing the world with them. We didn't do too much traveling when I was younger. If we did, like I said, California, we would drive. We didn't fly, guys, not 6 people. So we got to see the world that way, but I try to get my kids on the plane and get them their little stamps so we can see the world that way. And I hope they all travel, because it's a pretty cool, thing. Like, if you think about it, I was like, this is what America looks like, guys. Yeah, the Navajo and the Mexican. So it's just like really cool to not be ashamed of it like I was when I was a kid, because I did not like to tell people I was Mexican. Not until I was maybe 20. When I was 20, I had a friend, her mom was Hispanic too. She said, "Man, you can't say that like that. You have to be proud of who you are." And ever since then, I've been like, I am. I like who I am. I like where I come from. So pride, I definitely want to share that with the kids as well.
That's amazing. I'm going to ask my colleagues for final questions.
No, nothing other than to thank you on behalf of the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program for sharing your story with us. Before we turn it off, is there anything else you'd like to add or clarify?
No, I don't. I'm just really happy that I got to say some of these stories, because, until I was just sitting here talking with you, those were some pretty deep stories, you guys. Like, oh, wow. It it feels really cool to, have that knowledge. I'm going to go home and tell the kids now, because I think there's probably a couple of stories that they don't know yet.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, it was our pleasure. Thanks
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you so much.
That was nice.